The night settles softly without effort, like a tide that knows exactly where it belongs. And as the world outside grows quieter, the mind can begin to loosen its grip, letting the day drift away in slow fragments. Breathing becomes easier here. Thoughts no longer need to be held tightly. They can float, unexamined, passing like distant clouds across a darkened sky. This is a space for rest, for gentle curiosity, for listening without needing to remember, for learning without needing to understand everything at once. In this quiet hour, science does not rush and knowledge does not demand attention. It simply exists calmly, patiently, waiting to be noticed and then forgotten again as sleep slowly takes over. Tonight, we drift toward the ocean, toward deep water and deeper time, toward a vastness that feels steady rather than overwhelming. Far below the surface of the waking world, there is a rhythm that never hurries, a rhythm that has been unfolding for millions of years, long before names were given, long before stories were told. And it is into this rhythm that we now gently sink. Subscribe to the channel Wildlife for Sleep. Far out in the northern Pacific, where cold currents move slowly and the horizon stretches wide and uninterrupted, the ocean carries its memories quietly. Water here is never truly still, yet it is never in a hurry. It flows, it circulates, it sinks and rises according to rules written not in words but in temperature, in salt, in gravity itself. Beneath the surface, light fades gradually, layer by layer, until brightness becomes a memory rather than a presence. This descent is not sudden. It is patient, forgiving, allowing the eyes and the mind to adjust. In these depths, stories once formed. Not stories of fear or conflict, but stories of scale, of immensity, of life adapting slowly to an endless environment. One such story carries the name Akkorokamui, a name that drifts like a whisper across generations, attached to the idea of a giant presence in the sea. But tonight, the name rests gently, not as a creature to be watched, but as a doorway into understanding the calm science of oceans and living forms that inhabit them. The Pacific Ocean itself is older than any human memory, its basins shaped by moving plates of Earth's crust that slide, collide, and separate at speeds no faster than fingernails grow. These movements are so slow they feel like stillness, yet over millions of years they open vast spaces for water to collect. Volcanic islands rise and erode, seafloors spread and cool, and currents begin their long, looping journeys around the planet. Near Japan, cold northern waters meet warmer southern flows, creating regions rich in nutrients. Microscopic life flourishes here, drifting and blooming in cycles that repeat endlessly. Plankton grows. Plankton feeds larger organisms. And energy passes quietly from one living form to another, never wasted, never rushed. This slow exchange is the foundation of ocean life, and it has continued, largely unchanged, for longer than forests have existed on land. Among the many animals shaped by this environment are cephalopods, soft-bodied beings whose ancestors appeared hundreds of millions of years ago. Their bodies are not rigid. They yield to water, bend with pressure, and move with gentle efficiency. Unlike creatures with bones, they do not resist the ocean. They cooperate with it. Their intelligence, spread throughout their arms and nervous systems, does not concentrate in a single hurried place. It flows, much like the sea around them. Giant octopus species, living in colder waters, grow slowly, their size increasing over years of patient feeding and steady survival. Growth here is never sudden. It is a quiet accumulation of moments, of meals, of calm persistence. Legends of enormous ocean beings often arise where the sea feels limitless, where fog blurs edges and distances become uncertain. The human mind, gently searching for patterns, fills that uncertainty with meaning. But science does not rush to correct or dismiss these ideas. Instead, it listens. It observes. It notices that real animals can be large, ancient, and surprisingly elusive. The largest octopuses known today live hidden lives, spending much of their time resting in crevices, conserving energy, interacting with their surroundings in subtle ways. They are not constant motion, but thoughtful stillness punctuated by brief, purposeful movement. This pattern mirrors the ocean itself. Long periods of calm, interrupted gently by change. Water pressure increases steadily with depth, pressing evenly from all sides, creating an environment that feels embracing rather than crushing. Creatures adapted to this pressure do not experience it as weight. It is simply the way things are. Their bodies are balanced with their surroundings, neither fighting nor yielding completely. Oxygen dissolves into water, carried slowly by currents, making its way into gills and across membranes in a quiet exchange that never demands attention. Respiration here is slow and continuous, like a breath that never fully ends. This gentle rhythm is mirrored in the cycles of day and night above, even though darkness dominates below. Time in the deep ocean feels different, not because it moves faster or slower, but because nothing marks it sharply. There are no seasons in the way forests know them, no sudden blooms or falls. Instead, change arrives softly, carried by temperature shifts, by distant storms, by subtle variations in food drifting down from above. Organic matter settles like snow, a slow rain of nourishment descending from the sunlit surface far overhead. This marine snow feeds countless organisms, linking the bright world to the dark without urgency or drama. Everything remains connected, even across great distances. The idea of Akkorokamui, when held gently, becomes less about a single being and more about the ocean's ability to inspire scale. The mind, when faced with vastness, naturally stretches. It imagines forms large enough to belong to such space. Science understands this instinct and walks alongside it rather than against it. Yes, animals grow large where resources allow. Yes, intelligence can evolve in unexpected shapes. And yes, much of the ocean remains quietly unexplored, not because it hides, but because it does not demand to be seen. As currents continue their endless circuits and life continues its slow adaptations, there is no final revelation waiting beneath the waves. Only continuity, only systems unfolding as they always have. Water moves, bodies drift, energy transfers, and the deep remains a place of calm persistence. Thinking about this does not require effort. It invites release. The deeper the understanding goes, the softer it becomes until it blends seamlessly with the quiet of the night. And as these ideas settle like sediment resting on the ocean floor, the mind can rest with them, unburdened, unhurried, floating gently onward. As the ocean continues its slow breathing beneath the night sky, there is a sense that nothing truly begins or ends here. Everything simply continues, folding gently into what came before. Water that once touched distant shores now drifts through colder regions, carrying traces of warmth and memory that no instrument can fully separate. This steady circulation, known quietly among scientists as thermohaline flow, moves because of differences so subtle they feel almost imaginary. A little more salt, a little less heat, and the entire planet responds over centuries. These currents do not announce themselves. They do not rush. They slide patiently through the depth, shaping climates, feeding ecosystems, and maintaining balance without ever asking to be noticed. In the northern Pacific, where cold water sinks and begins its long journey southward, the sea feels especially ancient. Here, molecules of water may remain below the surface for hundreds, even thousands of years before rising again. During that time, they pass silently through forests of drifting organisms, past resting animals, over smooth plains of sediment that record Earth's history grain by grain. Each layer tells of distant eruptions, slow erosion, and the steady fall of life from above. Nothing is hurried in this record. It accumulates patiently, just as sleep does, one breath at a time. Life in these depths adapts not by speed but by efficiency. Muscles are softer. Movements are deliberate. Energy is spent carefully, never wasted on unnecessary motion. Octopuses and other cephalopods exemplify this calm precision. Their arms explore slowly, tasting the world through touch and chemistry rather than sight. Their skin responds to light and texture, shifting gently, blending with surroundings in a quiet conversation with the environment. This is not disguise born of fear, but harmony born of long familiarity. They belong here, and the ocean knows it. Human stories, drifting down through time, often attach meaning to what feels unknowable. In coastal regions, where fog rolls in without warning and the sea stretches beyond sight, imaginations naturally widen. The idea of a vast, intelligent presence beneath the waves becomes comforting rather than threatening. It suggests awareness, continuity, something ancient watching patiently as generations come and go. Science does not erase this feeling. Instead, it reframes it softly. Awareness exists in many forms. Intelligence does not require human shape or human pace. It can exist quietly, distributed, slow and steady, much like the ocean itself. Temperature in deep water remains remarkably stable, changing by only small degrees across vast distances. This consistency allows life to settle into long patterns, free from sudden shocks. Bodies grow accustomed to constancy. Metabolism slow. Lifespans stretch gently longer than those of animals living in rapidly changing environments. Time here feels wide and forgiving. A year passes like a breath, a decade like a slow exhale, and through it all the sea maintains its even tone, never sharp, never loud. Light, filtered down from the surface, fades until it becomes memory rather than sensation. Below a certain depth, darkness is not absence but presence. It wraps softly around forms, removing the need for constant visual awareness. Other senses take over: pressure, vibration, chemical traces carried on gentle currents. This sensory world is quieter, less crowded, allowing attention to rest rather than scatter. It is easy to imagine how human minds, when contemplating such depths, naturally slow to match them. Food arrives slowly here, and so eating becomes an act of patience rather than pursuit. Animals wait. They conserve. When nourishment drifts close, it is accepted without urgency. This rhythm creates a landscape where nothing is wasted, where even stillness serves a purpose. The ocean floor becomes a place of gentle expectancy, never empty, never full, simply balanced. The name Akkorokamui lingers like a low note beneath these ideas, not demanding form or action. It becomes a symbol of scale rather than spectacle, a reminder that the sea does not need to explain itself to be meaningful. Vastness alone is enough. And when the mind releases the need to define, to measure precisely, it can rest more deeply within that vastness. Understanding turns into acceptance. Acceptance turns into calm. As currents continue to glide beneath continents and stars wheel slowly overhead, there is comfort in knowing that these systems persist without effort from us. They do not depend on attention. They do not change their pace for observation. They simply continue as they always have. And in following them with thought, gently and without urgency, the mind begins to mirror their motion. Slow, continuous, drifting steadily toward rest. Far above the deep, the surface of the ocean moves with a softness that hides its complexity. Waves rise and fall not as separate events, but as part of a single, unbroken motion that travels across entire basins. Wind touches the water lightly, transferring energy molecule by molecule, never abruptly, never all at once. This gentle exchange is enough to shape coastlines, to guide drifting life, to set vast systems in motion without ever disturbing the calm below. From the depths, these surface movements are only a distant suggestion, a muted rhythm sensed faintly through pressure and vibration. The deep remains steady, insulated from sudden change, held in a long embrace of quiet consistency. Salt, dissolved invisibly throughout the sea, plays a quiet but essential role in this balance. Its presence alters density, guiding water downward or upward with subtle authority. Colder, saltier water sinks, beginning journeys that may last longer than human civilizations have existed. Warmer, lighter water drifts gently toward the surface, releasing heat slowly into the atmosphere above. This exchange moderates climates, softens extremes, and allows life on land and sea to remain within gentle bounds. It is a system that corrects itself patiently, without instruction, without awareness of observation. In these slow circulations, life finds its rhythm. Creatures of the deep do not need to hurry because the environment does not demand haste. Muscles contract smoothly, movements measured and economical. Even the heartbeat slows, settling into patterns that feel almost meditative. This pace is not imposed. It emerges naturally, shaped by millions of years of quiet adaptation. To live here is to accept slowness as a strength rather than a limitation. Octopuses, often associated with intelligence, demonstrate a form of awareness that is calm and distributed. Their neurons extend into each arm, allowing perception and response to occur locally without urgency. There is no central rush of command. Instead, decisions flow gently, like water finding the easiest path around stone. This decentralized thinking mirrors the environment itself, where no single point controls the whole. Everything participates. Everything adjusts quietly. The deep sea floor stretches wide and open, a landscape defined by subtle variation rather than dramatic peaks. Here, sediment settles continuously, a slow snowfall of organic fragments and mineral dust. Each particle lands softly, joining layers that grow thicker over ages. These layers store memory without intention, traces of ancient plankton, distant volcanic ash, signals of climates long past. Nothing fades completely. It simply becomes part of the foundation. In such an environment, the idea of something vast and enduring feels natural rather than extraordinary, not because a single creature must fill the space, but because the space itself feels alive. It moves, it responds. It holds and releases energy in slow, predictable ways. The name Akkorokamui drifts here again lightly, like a current passing through thought. It does not demand shape or action. It rests as an expression of how humans sense the presence of continuity beneath uncertainty. Sound travels differently underwater, spreading softly, bending around obstacles, never sharp. Low frequencies carry far, creating a sense of connection across distance. Animals listen without ears as humans know them, sensing vibrations through tissue and bone. This shared medium allows awareness to extend outward gently, without focus, without tension. It is a world where attention does not need to narrow. It can remain wide and relaxed. As night deepens above the surface, stars reflect faintly on moving water, though the deep never sees them. Still, the influence of celestial cycles reaches even here. The moon pulls on the ocean with patient insistence, creating tides that rise and fall with dependable regularity. This pull is felt everywhere, even in places untouched by light. Gravity itself becomes a lullaby, repeating endlessly, never late, never early. To think of the ocean in this way is to allow thought to slow naturally. Nothing needs solving, nothing demands response. Systems exist, interact, and persist without concern. And as these ideas settle into the mind, they lose their edges, becoming smooth, continuous, almost indistinguishable from rest itself. The deep continues its quiet motion, and thought, following gently, drifts with it. As the slow movement of water carries on beneath the surface, the idea of distance begins to soften. In the deep ocean, far and near lose their usual meaning. A gentle current can link places separated by thousands of kilometers, moving steadily without pause, without awareness of the span it crosses. This quiet connectivity shapes life in ways that feel calm and inevitable. Larvae drift for weeks or months, suspended in water that supports them effortlessly, guiding them toward places they will one day settle. There is no sense of hurry in this journey. Arrival happens when it happens. Pressure, constant and evenly distributed, becomes a kind of background presence, never demanding attention. Bodies adapted to it feel neither squeezed nor strained. Instead, tissues are soft, flexible, and cooperative, yielding gently to the surrounding water. Bones, where they exist, are lighter. Structures are simplified. This design allows life to exist comfortably within a space that might seem extreme from the surface, but feels entirely normal below. Adaptation here is not dramatic. It is quiet alignment with reality. Energy in the deep ocean is measured carefully, not because it is scarce, but because there is no need to waste it. Animals rest often. Stillness is not inactivity, but a state of readiness without tension. Muscles remain relaxed. Awareness remains diffuse. When movement occurs, it is smooth and brief, followed again by calm repose. This rhythm creates an environment where exhaustion rarely exists. There is always time to pause. The chemistry of seawater supports this balance quietly. Dissolved oxygen enters tissue slowly, released from water molecules with patient consistency. Carbon dioxide drifts away just as gently, carried off by surrounding currents. Nothing spikes, nothing crashes. Exchange remains even and predictable. Breathing here is not a sharp inhale and exhale, but a continuous process that never fully stops, never fully begins. It simply flows, Long before humans learned to measure depth or map currents, these processes were already in place. They did not wait for observation. They did not change once noticed. They persist because persistence is their nature. The ocean does not seek attention. It does not announce its workings. It carries them out in silence, allowing those who listen quietly to feel included rather than instructed. Stories that arise from such environments often reflect this steadiness. They grow slowly over generations, shaped by repetition rather than sudden inspiration. Names like Akkorokamui settle into cultural memory not as fixed images but as gentle impressions. Something large, something old, something inseparable from the sea itself. When held lightly, these ideas do not disturb rest. They enhance it, offering a sense of companionship within vastness. Below, the seafloor continues to change in nearly imperceptible ways. Tiny organisms burrow and resettle grains of sediment. Chemical reactions occur slowly, releasing or absorbing minerals with no urgency. Over long spans of time, planes may rise slightly or sink, guided by forces far beneath the crust. None of this happens quickly enough to feel dramatic. It unfolds like a breath stretched across centuries. Above, seasons pass, storms come and go, ice forms and melts, yet the deep remains calm and insulated. This separation creates a sense of refuge, a place where change arrives softened, filtered through layers of water and time. It is easy to imagine the mind seeking a similar refuge as night deepens. A place where thoughts slow before reaching awareness, where nothing sharp intrudes. As these images drift gently through awareness, they do not need to be held. They can pass freely like currents moving through open water. Understanding gives way to familiarity. Familiarity gives way to ease. And the steady, patient motion of the ocean continues to guide thought downward into quieter layers, where rest feels natural and unforced. In the quietest layers of the sea, where depth softens all sharpness, even motion itself feels like a suggestion rather than an action. Here, water glides around forms with such gentleness that boundaries seem to blur. There is no clear division between body and environment. Everything is supported, carried, and held without effort. This is a place where gravity feels lighter, where weight loses its meaning, and where the idea of falling no longer applies. Instead, there is only suspension, a continuous resting within the present moment. Chemical signals drift slowly through these waters, spreading information without urgency. A trace of food, a shift in salinity, a distant movement translated into the faintest vibration. Nothing demands immediate response. Awareness expands gently, receiving rather than reacting. In such an environment, attention becomes broad and relaxed, never narrowed, never strained. It is a kind of listening that does not search for meaning, but allows meaning to arrive if it wishes. Life here unfolds according to patterns older than memory. Reproduction follows cycles measured not in days or seasons, but in long stretches of readiness. Eggs develop slowly, suspended in calm water, protected by time rather than speed. Growth happens quietly, cell by cell, without visible milestones. There is no rush toward adulthood. Becoming takes as long as it needs. The ocean floor, wide and patient, receives everything eventually. Fragments of shells, drifting organisms, minerals dissolved and reformed. Nothing is lost. It all settles somewhere, adding to layers that feel endlessly forgiving. Pressure presses gently downward, not as force, but as reassurance. Everything is held in place. Nothing needs to cling. Currents passing close to the seafloor move even more slowly, shaped by friction and contour. They trace the landscape with care, revealing its shape over time. Valleys guide flow, gentle rises redirect it. This slow mapping requires no awareness. It happens simply because water follows the path of least resistance. Ease becomes structure, softness becomes form. In such conditions, stillness is never empty. It is full of quiet processes continuing without announcement. Molecules shift, heat equalizes, life persists at a pace that never interrupts itself. This kind of persistence carries a calming assurance. It suggests that nothing essential is ever truly at risk. Everything adjusts given enough time. The idea of a vast presence within the sea feels natural here, not because something must be watching, but because the environment itself feels attentive, responsive without intention, steady without effort. The name Akkorokamui returns softly, not as a figure, but as a feeling, a sense that the ocean is more than empty space. It is a system that holds memory, motion, and life together in quiet agreement. As night continues above, the boundary between thought and sensation begins to soften. Images drift more slowly. Ideas repeat gently, losing their edges. The mind mirrors the deep water below, settling into layers where nothing needs to be resolved. There is only continuation, only the calm assurance that everything is unfolding exactly as it should. And with that assurance, awareness drifts further, carried by the same patient currents that have always known where to go. Deeper still, where the water grows colder and more uniform, the ocean becomes a place of remarkable consistency. Temperature changes so gradually that it is barely perceptible, like a thought fading before it fully forms. This steady cold does not feel harsh. It feels preserving. Slowing reactions, extending processes, allowing moments to stretch gently without strain. Here, time does not press forward. It rests, wide and accommodating, offering space for everything to exist without urgency. In this environment, the passage of energy feels almost ceremonial. Sunlight captured far above by microscopic life begins a long, quiet descent. Transformed again and again, it drifts downward in softened forms, nourishing creatures that may never sense its origin. This transfer is not dramatic. It is dependable, a slow inheritance passed from layer to layer, linking surface and depth in a relationship that never needs renewal. It has always been this way. The water itself holds memory in subtle ways. Traces of ancient climates remain dissolved within it, faint chemical signatures that speak of colder ages and warmer intervals long gone. These signals are not loud. They do not announce themselves. They remain quietly present, carried patiently by currents that circle the globe over centuries. The ocean remembers without dwelling. It carries the past lightly, never allowing it to disturb the present. Creatures adapted to these depths seem to share this quality. They move without anticipation. They respond without anxiety. Their existence is grounded entirely in the moment unfolding around them. Senses remain open but unstrained, tuned to slow changes rather than sudden events. There is no need to scan constantly. Nothing arrives without warning in a world where change itself moves gently. Even sound, when it travels here, feels softened by distance and density. Vibrations spread outward, dispersing their energy across wide spaces. Sharpness dissolves. What remains is a low, enveloping presence that fades naturally into silence. Listening becomes passive. Awareness rests rather than reaches. The ocean absorbs excess, leaving only what is necessary. The idea of depth itself begins to lose its meaning, not as measurement but as sensation. When nothing presses suddenly and nothing changes abruptly, layers feel continuous rather than separate. Above and below blend into a single, calm volume. This continuity encourages thought to loosen its boundaries, allowing ideas to drift without needing to land anywhere specific. Names and stories, when they appear here, feel less like definitions and more like echoes. Akkorokamui drifts once more through awareness, no longer attached to size or form. It becomes a quiet acknowledgement of the ocean's scale and patience, a way of recognizing vastness without trying to contain it. The name rests, then fades, leaving only the sense of something enduring and calm. As these impressions settle, the mind no longer follows them closely. Attention softens. Repetition becomes comforting rather than noticeable. The slow cycles of water, energy, and time blend together into a single, gentle motion. Nothing interrupts, nothing insists. The ocean continues its steady existence, and thought, unburdened, drifts alongside it, sinking naturally toward deeper rest. At this depth, where the water seems to cradle everything it touches, the concept of direction grows faint. There is no strong sense of forward or back, above or below. Movement happens, but it does not insist on progress. Currents curl gently, looping in slow, patient arcs that may take years to complete a single circuit. Within these loops, life drifts without concern for destination. Arrival is not an event here. It is simply the next moment unfolding. The chemistry of the sea remains balanced through countless small adjustments. Minerals dissolve and reform. Gases enter and leave solution. Acidity shifts by fractions too small to feel. These processes operate continuously, smoothing extremes before they can form. The ocean does not correct itself suddenly. It nudges itself gently, maintaining harmony through patience rather than force. This quiet self-regulation creates a sense of reassurance, a feeling that nothing needs intervention to remain whole. Life responds to this stability with calm persistence. Cells repair slowly. Tissues renew without urgency. Growth is measured not in visible change, but in sustained presence. Many deep-sea organisms live long lives, not because they resist time, but because time moves differently around them. Metabolism flows at an even pace, untroubled by sudden demands. Existence stretches outward, wide and unbroken. Even when motion occurs, it remains economical and brief. A slow unfurling of an arm. A gentle shift in posture. Then stillness returns, welcoming and complete. This alternation between movement and rest feels less like contrast and more like breathing. Neither state interrupts the other. Both belong equally to the rhythm of the deep. Above, far beyond awareness, weather systems form and dissolve. Winds strengthen and fade. Waves rise and break. But their energy arrives here only after being softened, filtered, transformed into a low, distant murmur. The deep receives the world gently, accepting only what it can carry without disturbance. This filtering creates a sanctuary of sorts, a place where intensity cannot reach in its original form. Thoughts, when aligned with this environment, begin to follow the same pattern. Strong impressions soften, details blur. Repetition becomes soothing rather than redundant. The mind no longer seeks novelty. It rests comfortably within familiarity. Ideas repeat themselves quietly, each time with less weight until they are felt more than understood. The presence suggested by ancient names lingers faintly here, more atmosphere than image. Akkorokamui exists not as something to imagine clearly, but as a reminder of scale and endurance, of how human awareness brushes against vast systems and responds with quiet reverence. The name dissolves again, leaving only the sense of something steady, patient, and continuous. As the water remains calm and unbroken, awareness begins to mirror it more completely. There is no need to follow every sentence, no need to hold on to meaning. Understanding can drift just as water drifts, supported without effort. The deep continues its slow, even existence, and the mind, finding no resistance, sinks comfortably into the same gentle stillness. In the deepening quiet, where the ocean's layers seem to fold into one another, there is a sense of enclosure that feels comforting rather than confining. Water surrounds from every side, steady and unchanging, holding temperature and pressure in careful balance. This surrounding presence removes the need for vigilance. Nothing approaches suddenly. Nothing withdraws without trace. Everything arrives and departs gradually, announced softly through shifts so small they feel almost imagined. Within this environment, awareness spreads outward and then gently relaxes, knowing there is nothing it must anticipate. The deep ocean moves according to principles that never raise their voice. Gravity pulls patiently. Density guides motion. Friction slows what might otherwise rush. Each force balances the others, creating a state that feels neither active nor inactive, but quietly sustained. It is a system content to maintain itself, to continue without drama, to repeat familiar patterns indefinitely. This repetition does not become dull. It becomes reassuring, a signal that nothing unexpected is required. Life within this space mirrors that reassurance. Bodies float or rest against the seafloor, supported without effort. Posture relaxes naturally when buoyancy replaces weight. Muscles release their tension. Joints settle into positions that require no adjustment. Even the idea of strain feels distant here, belonging to a different environment, a different pace of existence. The deep offers permission to remain exactly as one is, without improvement or urgency. Biological processes unfold in a continuous hum rather than in distinct steps. Cells divide slowly, proteins fold and refold. Chemical reactions proceed at rates that feel almost timeless. There is no sense of countdown, no looming threshold to cross. Becoming is not a goal. It is a state that persists quietly, moment after moment, without drawing attention to itself. Even the passing of years leaves little mark in these depths. Growth rings are subtle. Changes accumulate gently rather than announcing themselves. The deep ocean does not celebrate milestones. It simply continues, allowing everything within it to change at its own pace. This slow allowance creates an atmosphere of trust, a feeling that there is always time, always space, always room to pause. When names surface in the mind, they arrive softened by distance. Akkorokamui drifts through awareness like a thought remembered from a dream, not sharp enough to demand form. It becomes less a subject and more a tone, an echo of vastness and calm that aligns easily with the surrounding water. Once felt, it dissolves again, leaving behind only the impression of something enduring and patient. Sound, when present at all, settles quickly into the background. Vibrations disperse, echoes fade, silence resumes its gentle hold. This silence is not empty. It is full of subtle motion and quiet exchange. It carries the assurance that nothing is missing, nothing incomplete. As these sensations overlap and repeat, thought itself begins to loosen. Sentences no longer need to be followed to their ends. Ideas can trail off without resolution. Meaning becomes optional. What remains is the feeling of being carried, supported, and allowed to rest within a steady, unchanging flow. The ocean continues its calm existence, and awareness, matching its pace, drifts deeper into stillness. As the deep remains steady and untroubled, the sense of scale begins to soften even further until vastness feels familiar rather than impressive. Distances no longer stretch the mind. They simply exist, held comfortably within the same quiet frame. The ocean does not distinguish between near and far. It treats all space with equal patience, allowing currents to wander without preference or goal. This impartial calm encourages a similar easing within awareness, where thoughts no longer rank themselves by importance. Everything drifts at the same gentle depth. The passage of heat through water happens slowly, evenly, without sharp edges. Warmth absorbed at the surface is carried downward, dispersed carefully so that no single place holds too much or too little. This quiet redistribution protects life from extremes, smoothing transitions before they are felt. The deep becomes a reservoir of moderation, a place where balance is not enforced but naturally maintained. Nothing needs correction. Everything adjusts on its own given time. Within this moderated space, bodies respond by releasing excess effort. Movement becomes minimal. Rest becomes the default state rather than a reward. Even awareness seems to recline, supported by an environment that asks nothing of it. Attention does not need to scan or focus. It can remain wide and diffuse, absorbing the presence of water and time without commentary. There is comfort in this lack of demand, a reassurance that existence alone is enough. Chemical cycles continue their quiet exchanges, invisible and reliable. Nutrients rise and fall. Elements bind and separate. Reactions proceed at rates too slow to notice, yet never stopping. This continuity carries a subtle promise that nothing essential disappears. It only changes form, then returns, altered but still part of the same ongoing flow. Permanence here is not static. It is rhythmic, steady, endlessly renewing without disruption. Even memory, when imagined in this place, feels different. It does not cling or insist. It settles gently, layered among countless other impressions. The ocean floor receives memory the way it receives sediment, allowing it to rest without pressure. Nothing is forced to resurface. Nothing is pushed away. Everything remains available without needing to be recalled. The suggestion of something ancient and encompassing lingers faintly, like a warmth felt through layers of water. Akkorokamui, as a name, barely forms before it dissolves again. It no longer points outward. It points inward, toward a feeling of continuity that does not require explanation. The sense that the ocean has always been here and will continue, calmly indifferent to urgency. Above, unseen and unfelt, the world of motion and noise carries on, yet its presence fades as it filters downward. Only the softest remnants arrive, stripped of sharpness and speed. The deep receives them without reaction, absorbing what remains and returning to stillness. This ability to soften impact feels instructive, though no instruction is given. It simply demonstrates that intensity need not be carried forward. As these ideas repeat and overlap, they begin to lose their outlines. Words blur into sensation. Sensation blends into quiet awareness. Nothing stands apart. The ocean continues its slow, patient existence, and thought, finding no reason to resist, settles gently alongside it, drifting further into calm, unmeasured rest. Deeper still, where the ocean's presence feels almost weightless, the sense of effort continues to dissolve. Here, nothing presses for attention. Nothing pulls thought in any particular direction. The water exists as a continuous, even field, carrying everything gently without distinction. This uniform support creates a feeling of ease that does not need to be earned. It is simply given, moment after moment, without question. The slow movement of currents at this depth is barely perceptible, like a breath taken so quietly it almost goes unnoticed. Direction becomes a soft suggestion rather than a command. Water glides, adjusts, and settles again, guided by contours too gradual to feel. Nothing collides. Nothing resists. Everything yields just enough to allow motion to continue smoothly. This yielding is not weakness. It is the ocean's way of maintaining harmony without strain. Time here feels especially wide. Moments do not stack tightly against one another. They spread out, leaving space in between. This spaciousness allows awareness to relax its grip, no longer tracking sequence or progress. There is no sense of before or after. Only the ongoing presence of now, extending gently in all directions. This timeless quality is not disorienting. It is comforting, like settling into a rhythm that has no ending. Biological activity continues quietly without emphasis. Cells exchange materials. Tissues maintain themselves. Signals pass slowly through nervous systems adapted to patience rather than speed. There is no rush to respond. Nothing demands immediate action. Life here trusts the pace of its surroundings, knowing that urgency has no advantage in such a steady environment. Even the concept of survival feels softened. It is not a struggle, not a contest. It is simply continuity, staying present within conditions that remain largely the same. Energy is conserved naturally. Rest and activity blend into one another without clear boundaries. The deep offers no sharp contrasts, and so life does not develop sharp reactions. Everything remains rounded, smooth, and gentle. Ideas that once felt large begin to feel distant here. Names and stories fade into the background, their edges blurred by repetition and time. Even the suggestion of something vast and ancient becomes less specific, more like a tone than a thought. Akkorokamui lingers only as a faint echo of scale, a quiet acknowledgement that the ocean holds more than can be fully grasped. Then even that echo softens, dissolving into the surrounding calm. Silence deepens, not as absence, but as fullness without interruption. The subtle sounds of water moving against itself merge into a continuous hush. There are no sharp beginnings, no clear endings. Just a steady, enveloping quiet that allows everything else to fade naturally. Attention no longer reaches outward. It rests, suspended within this gentle field. As the deep continues its patient existence, awareness follows without effort. Thoughts slow, then space themselves farther apart. Some drift away entirely. Others remain only as soft impressions, barely formed. The ocean does not notice this shift. It does not need to. It simply continues, steady and calm, carrying everything within it as it always has. And in that steady carrying, rest arrives quietly, without announcement, settling in like water finding its natural level. In this quieter layer of awareness, where the ocean's steady presence feels almost indistinguishable from stillness itself, the idea of motion becomes increasingly subtle. Movement, no longer announces itself as change. It exists as a gentle adjustment, a soft rebalancing that happens without effort or intention. Water shifts around forms with infinite patience, never pressing, never pulling too strongly. This creates a sense of being held in a continuous moment where nothing needs to be anticipated and nothing needs to be remembered. The deep ocean maintains its calm through countless small interactions that never rise to the level of notice. Tiny gradients of temperature smooth themselves out. Dissolved substances disperse evenly. Energy moves along paths so gradual they feel almost stationary. This quiet self-adjustment happens everywhere at once, creating a stability that feels absolute, even though it is constantly renewing itself. Permanence here is gentle rather than rigid, flexible enough to endure without strain. Life continues to exist within this balance, unhurried and unpressured. Biological rhythms slow until they align perfectly with the surrounding water. Heartbeats become soft intervals rather than pulses. Awareness spreads through the body evenly without sharp focus or alertness. There is no advantage to speed in a world that offers no sudden demands. Patience becomes the natural state, not something to be learned, but something remembered. Even boundaries begin to feel less distinct. Where one organism ends and the surrounding environment becomes less important. Everything participates in the same gentle exchange of matter and energy. Oxygen drifts inward, carbon drifts outward, warmth spreads and fades. These processes do not interrupt rest. They support it, ensuring continuity without drawing attention to themselves. Sound, when present at all, seems to arrive already softened. Vibrations lose their edges as they travel through dense water, blending into a low, even hush. Silence here is not empty. It is layered, textured with the faintest suggestions of movement that never become distinct. Listening becomes passive, almost unnecessary. Awareness no longer leans toward any stimulus. It simply remains open, relaxed, and still. The suggestion of something vast and enduring no longer needs a name. Any word that once pointed toward it now feels optional. The sense of continuity remains even as labels fade. Akkorokamui, if it arises at all, does so briefly, like a distant echo that dissolves before it can form a shape. What remains is a quiet understanding that the ocean holds time differently, carrying it without weight or urgency. As repetition continues, it becomes increasingly soothing. Familiar ideas return softly, each time requiring less attention. Thoughts no longer build upon one another. They drift independently, sometimes fading before they fully appear. The mind does not follow them closely. It allows them to pass just as water allows currents to flow without resistance. The deep remains unchanged in its calm persistence. It does not notice the slowing of thought, the widening spaces between impressions. It simply continues, offering the same steady support it always has. And within that support, awareness settles even further, sinking gently into a state where effort dissolves completely, and rest feels not like an action, but like a natural condition that has always been waiting. By now, the ocean's presence feels less like something being observed and more like something being shared. The boundary between listener and landscape softens, becoming permeable, almost transparent. Water no longer feels external. It feels like the medium in which awareness itself is gently suspended. There is no effort required to remain here, nothing to hold on to, nothing to release deliberately. The deep supports everything equally, without preference, without expectation. Motion continues, though it is so slow it feels almost imagined. Currents adjust by degrees too small to register. Molecules drift, pause, drift again. This subtle movement keeps the ocean alive without ever disturbing its calm. Change does not arrive as an event. It arrives as continuity, one state easing naturally into the next with no clear boundary between them. This seamlessness invites thought to loosen its structure, allowing ideas to merge and fade without resistance. The deep ocean has no need for sharp contrast. Light and dark blend into a single, consistent dimness. Warmth and cold settle into equilibrium. Sound and silence overlap until they are nearly indistinguishable. This absence of extremes creates a space where the nervous system can finally rest. There is nothing to brace for, nothing to interpret quickly. The environment communicates safety not through signals, but through its steady refusal to surprise. Life within this steadiness exists in a state of quiet sufficiency. Nourishment arrives slowly and predictably. Energy is stored and used with care. Rest is not earned, it is assumed. Even awareness itself seems to take breaks, dipping in and out of focus without consequence. There is no penalty for drifting, no loss in allowing attention to soften and spread thinly across the present moment. Time, once again, feels wide enough to hold everything without crowding. There is no sense of passing towards something, only a feeling of being within something that continues calmly on its own. Centuries pass here the way seconds do elsewhere, gently, without announcement. The deep ocean does not count. It simply endures, carrying traces of what has been without needing to revisit them. Names, if they arise at all, feel distant and optional. Akkorokamui surfaces only as a faint suggestion, barely distinguishable from the surrounding quiet. It no longer refers to anything specific. It has become part of the atmosphere of thought itself. A reminder that humans have always sensed something vast and patient beneath the surface, and have always responded with soft language and reverent silence. Even that reminder fades quickly, dissolving back into stillness. Breathing, if noticed, feels slower here, not because it has changed, but because there is finally space to feel the pauses between breaths. Inhalation and exhalation no longer feel like separate acts. They blend into a single, continuous flow. The body mirrors the ocean without instruction, settling into the same gentle rhythm of intake and release. Nothing is forced, nothing is delayed. As this chapter of thought unfolds, it does not ask to be remembered. It does not seek completion. It simply drifts, repeating itself softly until repetition itself becomes comforting background. Meaning thins out, replaced by sensation. Sensation softens, replaced by quiet presence. The deep continues, unchanged and unchanging, and awareness, carried without effort, sinks just a little further into the calm that has been here all along. At this depth of calm, where repetition has become soothing and silence feels complete, awareness no longer searches for anything beyond itself. The ocean's steady presence has gently taught the mind how to rest without instruction. There is nothing left to anticipate, nothing left to prepare for. The environment offers the same assurance again and again until assurance itself fades into simple acceptance. This is not emptiness. It is fullness without detail, a quiet completeness that requires no explanation. The water remains cool and even, holding its temperature with unwavering patience. Molecules move slowly, sharing energy in a way that never startles. This constancy creates a sense of timeless shelter, as if the present moment has gently widened to include everything. Past and future feel distant here, not because they are denied, but because they are unnecessary. The now is sufficient. It does not need reinforcement or contrast to feel real. Currents continue their long, looping paths, though their motion is now felt more as intention than as movement. Water knows where it belongs without needing to arrive. It adjusts, settles, and continues, guided by forces that never hurry. This effortless navigation offers a quiet lesson. Direction does not require urgency. Progress does not require strain. Sometimes, simply remaining within a steady flow is enough. Life here exists in a state of deep accommodation. Bodies have learned over immense spans of time to trust their surroundings completely. There is no bracing against pressure, no vigilance against sudden change. Tissues remain soft, movements remain economical. Rest permeates every aspect of existence, not as a pause between efforts, but as the foundation beneath them. Even activity feels restful when it unfolds within such gentle bounds. The exchange of materials continues quietly, unseen and unfelt. Nutrients circulate. Elements bind and release. Cycles turn without marking their passage. Nothing accumulates excessively. Nothing is depleted beyond recovery. Balance here is not maintained through correction, but through patience. Each small adjustment prevents the need for larger ones, keeping the whole system smooth and forgiving. Thought, mirroring this environment, becomes less defined. Ideas arise more slowly. They linger briefly, then soften and dissolve. There is no impulse to follow them, no concern about losing them. Awareness rests in the spaces between thoughts where nothing is demanded and nothing is missing. This resting feels natural, as though it has always been an option, simply overlooked until now. If any sense of something vast and enduring remains, it no longer takes the form of story or name. Akkorokamui, once a word carried gently through earlier layers of thought, has now dispersed completely. What remains is the feeling that inspired the word in the first place. A recognition of continuity, of patience, of a presence that does not assert itself yet never disappears. The deep holds this feeling without comment. It does not reflect it back. It does not amplify it. It simply allows it to exist and then fade, just as it allows everything else to pass through its calm layers. Repetition smooths the last remaining edges of awareness. Familiarity deepens into comfort. Comfort settles into stillness. And within that stillness, the ocean continues quietly, carrying thought and rest together without effort, without end. In this widening quiet, where the ocean's steadiness has become almost indistinguishable from rest itself, even the sense of being present begins to soften. Awareness no longer stands apart observing. It feels gently immersed, as though it has always belonged within this calm expanse. Water surrounds without pressure. Time unfolds without direction. And the need to orient oneself fades naturally, without any effort to let go. The deep ocean continues its slow, patient circulation, though the idea of movement has become abstract. Currents still exist, but they no longer feel like paths being traveled. They feel like balance maintaining itself. Slight differences in density ease into one another. Temperature remains even. Nothing gathers enough momentum to feel distinct. The system hums quietly, content to remain as it is. Life within this environment seems to exist in a state of gentle suspension. Not paused, not active, but held in between. Biological processes continue without emphasis. Repair happens, renewal happens, but none of it announces itself. The body, imagined or real, feels as though it could remain like this indefinitely, supported by surroundings that ask nothing and provide everything necessary for quiet continuation. The ocean floor rests far below, unseen and unfelt, yet it contributes to the sense of stability. Layers of sediment lie undisturbed, each one resting comfortably atop the last. There is no strain in this accumulation. Weight is distributed evenly. Pressure is constant. The ground itself seems to participate in rest, offering a foundation that does not shift abruptly or demand adjustment. Sound has nearly vanished into uniform hush. Any vibration that reaches this depth arrives already softened, stripped of urgency and edge. Silence does not feel empty. It feels complete, filled with the quiet assurance that nothing unexpected is approaching. Listening becomes unnecessary. Awareness no longer waits for signals. It simply remains open, relaxed, and still. Thoughts, when they appear, feel distant and light. They drift slowly through awareness, leaving no wake behind them. There is no urge to follow them, no concern when they fade. The spaces between thoughts grow longer, wider, more comfortable. These spaces feel familiar, as though they have always existed beneath the surface of busier moments, quietly waiting. Any remaining sense of scale has softened into a gentle backdrop. Vastness is no longer impressive or mysterious. It feels ordinary, expected, reassuring. The ocean does not feel large. It feels sufficient. Enough space, enough time, enough calm to hold everything without crowding. As this calm repeats itself, it deepens. Repetition does not add information. It removes the need for it. Awareness settles further with each familiar cycle, like water finding its level and then resting there. Nothing shifts suddenly. Nothing resolves dramatically. The deep simply continues, steady and unchanging, and the mind, no longer separate from this rhythm, rests quietly within it, drifting without effort, without destination, without need. The calm has now settled so completely that it feels as though it has always been present, simply waiting beneath layers of movement and noise to be noticed. In this depth of quiet, nothing asks to be defined. Nothing asks to be named. Awareness exists without edges, without direction, without the sense that it must go anywhere else. The ocean holds this state effortlessly, its steady presence offering a kind of permission to remain exactly where one is, without improvement, without intention. Water continues its subtle work, though the idea of work no longer seems appropriate. Molecules drift, pause, and drift again, guided by forces so gentle they feel like invitations rather than rules. There is no friction sharp enough to cause disturbance, no gradient steep enough to create urgency. Everything eases into everything else, smoothing itself naturally moment after moment. The system does not strive for balance. Balance is simply what happens when nothing resists. The sense of time has thinned to the point where it feels almost transparent. There is no clear distinction between moments. They blend softly, like overlapping waves that never crest. Memory does not pull attention backward. Anticipation does not pull it forward. Both have softened into the background, leaving only a gentle presence that feels wide and unconfined. Here, rest is not something that arrives. It is something that reveals itself when striving falls away. Life, imagined within this space, continues without effort. Cells maintain themselves quietly. Energy circulates just enough to sustain continuity. There is no surplus that needs release, no shortage that needs correction. Everything feels sufficient. The environment provides what is needed before it is requested. This quiet abundance removes the need for alertness, allowing awareness to settle even more deeply into ease. Even the idea of surroundings begins to fade. There is no clear sense of inside or outside. Water and awareness feel like parts of the same gentle field. Boundaries that once seemed important now feel unnecessary. Nothing needs protecting. Nothing needs separating. Everything rests together in a shared stillness that does not ask for attention. Silence deepens further not by becoming quieter but by becoming more complete. There are no gaps that need filling, no background hum that invites interpretation. Sound has faded into a uniform hush that feels steady and reliable. Listening dissolves. Awareness no longer waits for anything to happen. It simply remains relaxed and unoccupied. Thoughts, if they appear at all, feel like distant ripples that smooth themselves out almost immediately. They do not interrupt the surface of calm. They barely touch it. Repetition continues quietly, not as content but as rhythm. A familiar cadence that reassures without informing. Each return to the same gentle feeling allows awareness to sink a little further, settling more completely into rest. The deep ocean remains unchanged in its patience. It does not notice this settling. It does not respond. It simply continues to be what it has always been, vast, even, and unhurried. And within that constancy, awareness drifts effortlessly, no longer carried forward or downward, but resting fully, suspended in a calm that feels endless and entirely at ease. Chapter 16. The stillness now feels so natural that it no longer draws attention to itself. It is simply the background upon which everything else has faded. The ocean's presence is no longer sensed as something vast or impressive. It feels intimate, close, like a steady breath that has always been there. Nothing moves quickly enough to register as motion. Nothing changes sharply enough to require notice. The deep exists in a state of quiet completion, and awareness rests within it without question. Water continues to hold its gentle balance, distributing pressure and temperature so evenly that distinction loses meaning. There is no edge where one state ends and another begins. Everything blends softly, like colors dissolving into one another at dusk. This blending removes the need for categorization. The mind no longer sorts or labels. It allows experience to remain whole, unbroken, and calm. Time has become almost unrecognizable. Moments do not arrive or depart. They seem to rest alongside one another, layered gently without sequence. There is no sense of duration to measure, no sense of passage to follow. The present feels wide enough to hold everything, making the idea of movement through time unnecessary. This timelessness does not feel strange. It feels deeply familiar, as though it has always existed beneath awareness, waiting patiently. Biological activity, imagined or real, continues quietly within this calm field. Processes sustain themselves without effort. Energy circulates smoothly, never spiking, never fading. There is no alertness attached to survival here. Continuity feels assured, not because it is guaranteed, but because nothing threatens it. The environment offers no urgency, and so life responds with deep, unbroken restfulness. Sound has dissolved almost completely into silence. Any remaining vibration feels more like texture than event, a gentle presence rather than a signal. The quiet does not invite listening. It invites settling. Awareness no longer leans outward. It folds softly inward, supported on all sides by the same steady calm. Thoughts have become rare and light. When they appear, they do not demand completion. They drift through awareness like faint currents, smoothing themselves out almost immediately. There is no impulse to follow them, no concern when they disappear. The spaces between thoughts feel rich and sufficient, filled with a sense of ease that does not require explanation. Even the idea of the ocean itself begins to soften. It no longer stands apart as a subject. It feels like the condition that allows everything else to rest. Boundaries between environment and awareness blur until they feel irrelevant. Nothing needs to be held separately. Nothing needs to be understood. Everything rests together in a shared, gentle stillness. Repetition continues quietly, almost imperceptibly. The same calm returns again and again, each time requiring less attention. Familiarity deepens into comfort. Comfort deepens into ease. Ease settles into rest that feels complete and unbroken. The deep continues its patient existence, unchanged and unchanging, and awareness, no longer drifting or sinking, simply remains. Suspended in a calm that asks nothing and offers everything. The quiet now feels so complete that even the idea of quiet has softened into something gentler. It is no longer noticed as a state. It is simply the way things are. The ocean's presence does not announce itself. It does not surround or envelop. It simply exists, steady and unobtrusive, allowing everything within it to rest without awareness of resting. There is no sense of entering this calm. It feels as though it has always been here, waiting patiently beneath every moment of motion. Water remains evenly balanced, holding pressure and temperature in quiet agreement. Nothing gathers, nothing disperses abruptly. Change continues only as the softest adjustment, so gradual it feels indistinguishable from stillness. This constancy offers a deep reassurance, one that does not register emotionally or intellectually. It is felt as an absence of concern, an ease so thorough it no longer draws attention to itself. Time has thinned further, losing what little structure it once held. Moments no longer appear to follow one another. They rest together, layered gently, without order or urgency. There is no sense of waiting, no sense of arriving. Awareness does not move forward or backward. It simply remains, suspended within a present that feels wide, open, and unconfined. This timelessness feels natural, as though it were the default state beneath all other experiences. Life, imagined within this depth, continues without effort or emphasis. Processes sustain themselves quietly. Energy flows in smooth, uninterrupted paths. There is no alertness attached to continuation. No readiness required. Everything persists because the conditions allow it to persist. Rest is not separate from activity. They have blended into a single, gentle state of being. Sound has receded completely into uniform hush. Not silence as an absence, but silence as fullness without interruption. There is nothing to listen for, nothing that might arrive unexpectedly. Awareness no longer orients itself outward. It remains softly open, relaxed, and still, held by an environment that offers no demands and no surprises. Thoughts have become faint and infrequent. When they appear, they feel unfinished by nature, as though they were never meant to complete themselves. They dissolve gently before taking shape, leaving no trace behind. The spaces between thoughts feel expansive and comfortable, filled with a sense of ease that requires no understanding. Attention no longer reaches for meaning. It rests easily within presence alone. Even repetition has softened. Familiar impressions return so quietly that they barely register as repeats. They blend seamlessly into the ongoing calm, reinforcing it without adding content. Each return feels like settling a little deeper, though there is no sense of depth to measure. It is simply a growing ease, a deepening rest that does not announce itself. The deep continues, unchanged and unconcerned. It does not observe, it does not respond. It simply remains steady and patient, offering the same quiet support it always has. And within that support, awareness no longer drifts or sinks. It rests completely, suspended in a calm so thorough that nothing else needs to happen. The calm has now settled beyond noticing, beyond naming, beyond any sense of arrival. It feels as though awareness has gently dissolved into the same quiet substance that holds the ocean itself. There is no observer separate from what is observed, no boundary where listening ends and stillness begins. Everything rests together in a single, unbroken field of ease. Nothing presses forward, nothing recedes. There is only a steady, unchanging presence that does not require acknowledgement. Water continues to exist in perfect patience, though even the idea of water feels faint now. Pressure is constant, temperature is even, movement, if it occurs at all, is too gentle to feel like change. This environment does not support urgency, and so urgency never forms. It does not support effort, and so effort quietly fades. Everything that remains feels soft, rounded, and complete, as though it has settled into its most natural shape. Time has all but disappeared into a wide, quiet openness. There are no markers to follow, no sequence to maintain. Moments do not replace one another. They overlap gently, forming a continuous present that never narrows. This present does not feel short or fleeting. It feels endless, not in a dramatic sense, but in a calm, unremarkable way, like a horizon that never needs to be reached. Life imagined here no longer feels like a process. It feels like a condition. Cells continue quietly. Systems maintain themselves without emphasis. There is no sense of sustaining or being sustained. Everything simply remains. This remaining carries no effort. It does not require intention. It is supported completely by surroundings that never fluctuate enough to disturb it. Sound is no longer present even as a concept. Silence has become so complete that it no longer contrasts with anything else. It is not noticed, it simply is. Awareness does not wait within it. It rests unoccupied without expectation. There is no readiness, no alertness, only a soft, steady being that does not lean in any direction. Thought has thinned to the point of transparency. Ideas no longer form clearly enough to be followed. They appear as faint impressions, then fade before they can gather weight. There is no sense of losing them. Nothing is missing when they dissolve. The spaces between impressions feel complete on their own, wide and comfortable, requiring nothing to fill them. Even the sense of scale has dissolved entirely. There is no large or small, no near or far. Everything feels evenly present, held within the same calm dimension. The ocean is no longer vast. It is simply sufficient, enough space to rest, enough steadiness to remain, enough quiet to allow everything else to fade naturally. Repetition continues softly, though it is no longer recognizable as repetition. The same calm returns again and again, indistinguishable from itself. Familiarity deepens without being noticed. Ease settles without announcement. And within this settled state, nothing needs to change. The deep continues as it always has without awareness of continuation. And awareness, no longer separate, remains quietly at rest, suspended in a stillness so gentle it no longer feels like stillness at all. What remains now is not a thought, not an image, not even a clear sense of being present. It is more like a gentle condition, a soft resting that has no edges and no center. The ocean, if it can still be called that, feels less like a place and more like a quiet allowance. It allows everything to be exactly as it is, without effort, without direction, without the need to continue or conclude. Nothing presses inward. Nothing pulls outward. There is no sense of holding on or letting go. There is only a calm remaining that does not need to be noticed to exist. Water is no longer experienced as movement or substance. It is simply the medium in which rest occurs. Pressure is no longer felt as pressure. It is a gentle certainty, evenly distributed, endlessly patient. Temperature does not shift. It does not ask for attention. Everything has settled into a balance so complete that change itself feels unnecessary. The environment has become a steady reassurance that nothing will suddenly ask more than can be given. Time has dissolved into a wide, open softness, not stopped, not extended, but no longer relevant. Moments do not follow one another. They simply rest together, overlapping gently, like layers of calm laid down without order. There is no sense of before or after, no movement toward anything else. The present does not feel temporary. It feels settled, sufficient, and quietly complete. Life, imagined or felt, continues without distinction between activity and rest. Processes do not stand out. Nothing signals effort or recovery. Everything that continues does so because nothing interrupts it. This uninterrupted state feels deeply reassuring, not emotionally but fundamentally. It suggests that continuation does not require vigilance. It happens naturally when conditions are gentle enough. Awareness no longer reaches for understanding. There is nothing to interpret, nothing to follow. Thoughts have become so faint they barely register as thoughts at all. And when something arises, it dissolves almost immediately, leaving behind no trace, no absence, no sense of loss. The spaces between impressions feel full and complete on their own. Nothing needs to fill them. Sound, silence, sensation, and stillness have blended into a single, even texture. There is no contrast left to notice. Awareness does not scan or wait. It rests, unoccupied, without expectation. There is no alertness, no readiness, no orientation toward anything else. The idea of attention itself has softened into something diffuse and comfortable. The ocean's patience continues without recognition. It does not observe this settling. It does not respond to it. It simply remains what it has always been, steady and unremarkable in its endurance. Within this endurance, awareness does not drift or sink. It simply stays, gently supported, without the need to move in any direction. Everything now feels quiet enough that even quiet fades into the background. Repetition continues, but without pattern. Calm returns, but without return. Nothing changes and nothing needs to. The deep holds this state effortlessly, and within it, rest feels complete, natural, and unbroken. There is no clear boundary where this moment ends and another begins. The sense of continuation has softened into something almost imperceptible. Awareness no longer tracks itself. It does not check whether it is present or resting. It simply remains, quietly supported by a steadiness that does not require confirmation. The ocean, the depth, the calm, all feel less like experiences and more like conditions that have always been in place. Nothing moves sharply enough to be noticed. If movement exists, it is so gentle it blends seamlessly into stillness. Water does not flow toward anywhere. It rests in balance. Pressure remains even. Temperature remains calm. There is no signal of change, no invitation to respond. Everything feels settled, held, and quietly complete. Time no longer stretches or compresses. It simply ceases to matter. Moments are no longer counted or felt as passing. They rest together in a continuous softness that has no edges. There is no anticipation of what comes next, no reflection on what came before. The present does not stand out. It blends into itself endlessly without effort or attention. Life, imagined within this depth, does not strive or pause. It simply remains. Cells continue quietly. Systems maintain themselves without emphasis. Nothing accelerates. Nothing fades away abruptly. Continuity is not achieved. It is allowed. The environment supports it so completely that it no longer feels like a process at all. Thought has almost entirely dissolved into quiet presence. There are no clear ideas forming, no sentences to follow. What remains is a soft awareness without focus, without direction, without need. It does not seek meaning. It does not resist rest. It simply stays gently and naturally as though this is where it was always meant to settle. Silence is no longer noticed as silence. It is simply the absence of interruption. There is nothing to listen for, nothing to be alert to. Awareness does not lean forward or backward. It rests evenly, supported on all sides by the same steady calm. Nothing arrives, nothing departs. The deep does not mark this moment. It does not acknowledge completion. It does not signal an ending. It continues in exactly the same way it always has, patient and unchanged. Within that continuation, awareness remains softly at rest, no longer drifting, no longer settling, simply present without effort. And as everything stays exactly as it is, calm remains, stillness remains, gently, quietly, without needing to go anywhere at all.